She said it was just a cake. But I was asking for more than that. A simple request on my 60th birthday, a single slice of cake, but instead, I was met with ridicule, dismissal, and a feeling that I didn't belong in the family I had given everything to. How did it come to this? How did the woman who had spent 30 years of her life building and nurturing a family become invisible to them? I guess it all started with that one small request. It was supposed to be a simple wish, a modest one even, my 60th birthday, a milestone I thought would be quietly celebrated with the family I'd worked so hard to build. All I wanted was a slice of cake, a small indulgence at that Brooklyn dessert place everyone was raving about. It wasn't about the cake itself. It was about feeling valued, about finally receiving something for myself after decades of giving everything I had. But when I gently mentioned it at dinner that night, hoping for their support, I was met with disdain. Leonard, my husband of 30 years, slammed his knife down onto his plate. His face was twisted into a frown, his tone sharp, as if my request was a betrayal. "Claire, how old are you? Still dreaming about birthday cake? That place charges over $100 for a piece of sugar. Do you think we're made of money?" My fingers trembled, but I didn't respond. It wasn't worth the fight. I wasn't asking for much, just a small indulgence. But somehow, it felt like I was asking for the moon. My children, Mike and Ashley, shot me matching looks of disapproval. Mike's eyebrows tightened as he added, "Could you try not being so wasteful?" And just like that, I was dismissed, just a nuisance in their eyes. I could feel the years of quiet sacrifice, of putting everyone else first, weighing down on me. Was it too much to ask for one small piece of happiness on my own birthday later that evening? While scrolling through Instagram, I came across a photo that cut through me like a knife. It was a picture of Leonard, Mike, Ashley, and Noah, all sitting around a pristine table at a luxury restaurant in Manhattan. The caption read, "Celebrating the good life." It was everything I had hoped for and more, except I wasn't there. I was nothing more than an afterthought, a ghost in the family I had given everything for. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing new. I had spent 30 years living in a family where my dreams were always secondary, where my needs were pushed aside in favor of everyone else's. And yet, that night, I realized something had shifted inside me. Maybe I wasn't going to wait for their approval anymore. Maybe it was time to finally put myself first. The days that followed my 60th birthday felt heavy with unspoken tension. Leonard, Mike, Ashley, and even little Noah seemed to have forgotten about that dinner, forgotten about the way they had made me feel invisible, as if my request was nothing more than a joke. It was as though nothing had happened. And yet, everything had changed for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deep inside me had broken that night, something that could never be mended by their empty words of apology. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was just a misunderstanding, that they hadn't meant to make me feel like such an afterthought. But as the days passed, the weight of their disregard pressed harder against my chest. I would find myself staring out the window, wondering how I had come to this point, how I had spent my entire life caring for everyone around me, only to be treated as if I were invisible. My dreams, my wishes, had always been secondary to theirs. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my own desires, for them, and yet, in return, I received nothing but coldness. That night, as I was scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled upon a photo Stephanie had posted a picture from a luxury restaurant in Manhattan. The preset menu there started at over $1,000 per person, a far cry from the slice of cake I had hoped for. In the picture, Leonard, Mike, Ashley, and Noah sat at a pristine table, all smiles, all perfectly posed like a picture-perfect family, the family I had once belonged to, except now. I was no longer a part of that scene. I wasn't even invited. I felt a pang in my chest, but I didn't cry. I didn't know if I had any tears left to shed. The truth was, they hadn't even noticed my absence. The family I had spent years building my husband, my children had moved on without me. Stephanie had become the new center of their world, the woman who had replaced me in every sense. She was the one now sitting at their dinner tables, sharing their laughs, and being celebrated for everything I had once been. The sting of that image stayed with me for days, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. It wasn't just about the cake anymore. It was about everything that had led up to this moment. It was about the years of putting everyone else first while my own dreams were left to wither. It was about the sacrifices I had made, the compromises I had endured, and the constant neglect of my needs. It was about how, despite everything I had done, I had been replaced by someone younger, someone newer, someone who fit into their vision of what a perfect family looked like. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect homemaker. But in the process, I had lost myself. I had become so wrapped up in meeting everyone else's expectations that I forgot to ask for anything for myself. The birthday cake was just the tipping point. It was the moment I realized that if I didn't start living for myself, if I didn't start demanding respect from the people I had sacrificed everything for, then I might as well stop living altogether. The next day, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the walls that had witnessed all those years of sacrifice, the walls that had seen me cook countless meals, clean endless dishes, and pour my heart into this family. I thought about the dreams I had put aside, dreams of opening my own bakery, of creating something beautiful for myself. For so many years, I had brushed those dreams aside, telling myself that one day, when everything was perfect, I would pursue them. But now, I realized that day was never going to come unless I made it happen. I began making plans. For the first time in 30 years, I started thinking about what I wanted, not what Leonard or Mike or Ashley wanted, but what I wanted. I researched bakeries, recipes, and locations. I went online and signed up for business courses. I bought a notebook and started sketching out ideas for my dream bakery, the one I had always dreamed of opening. It wasn't much, just a few pages of scribbled thoughts, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But hope alone wasn't enough. I knew there was still a long road ahead, and it wouldn't be easy. I still had to face Leonard and the children, who had made it clear they didn't care about my dreams. I had to confront the reality that they saw me as nothing more than a source of convenience, a background character in their lives. They had never supported my ambitions, my desires, and they certainly weren't going to start now. But that didn't matter anymore. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for me. The first step was confronting Leonard. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it. I had to stand up for myself, to finally make him understand that I was not the woman he had reduced me to. I had been a partner, a mother, and a caretaker for so many years. But I was also a person with dreams and needs. I was tired of living in the shadows of their expectations. I was tired of being the one who always gave, but never received. So, I waited for the right moment. I waited for the day when Leonard came home, expecting me to cook, to clean, to take care of everything as I always did. And when he walked through the door that evening, I was ready. I looked at him, meeting his eyes for the first time in years, and I spoke the words that had been building inside me for so long. I'm done, I said, my voice steady and calm. I've given you everything I have for 30 years, but now I'm going to do something for myself. I'm starting a bakery, and I'm going to make my dreams come true. Whether you support me or not doesn't matter anymore. I'm doing this for me. His reaction was exactly what I had expected: disbelief, anger, and a refusal to understand. But that didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't seeking his approval. I wasn't waiting for his permission. I was taking control of my life, and nothing was going to stop me. After that evening, everything seemed to shift within me. I couldn't go back to the way things were, pretending everything was fine when, in reality, I had been suffocating under the weight of their expectations. Leonard, Mike, Ashley, and even little Noah, none of them had truly seen me for years. I had become nothing more than a background character in their lives, a silent figure who was always there when they needed something, but never when I needed anything in return. The birthday cake, that single, simple wish, had been my breaking point. It wasn't about the cake, not really. It was about the deeper need for recognition, for acknowledgement, for some small sign that my presence mattered in the family, but they didn't care. They hadn't cared for a long time. As the days passed, the feeling of rejection and bitterness began to settle into my bones. It wasn't just the cake that stung. It was the way they had dismissed me, the way they had laughed and belittled my dreams. Stephanie had seamlessly slid into the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, the one who got everything right. She was beautiful, successful, poised, and apparently she had everything Leonard and the children wanted. She had become the shiny new object in their lives, and I had been tossed aside like yesterday's news. At first, I tried to suppress my feelings, telling myself that I should be grateful for the family I had. After all, I had spent 30 years raising them, supporting them, and making sure they never lacked for anything. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how hollow that gratitude felt. I had poured my heart and soul into this family, and in return, I had received nothing but ridicule and neglect. One evening, while I was cleaning the kitchen, I came across an old photograph tucked behind some papers. It was a picture from our early years together, Leonard and me, smiling at our wedding, young and full of hope. It felt like a lifetime ago. I stared at the photo for a long time, feeling a mixture of sadness and disbelief. How had we gotten here? How had the man in that photo become the man who could barely tolerate my presence, let alone show any affection? The anger I had been holding back began to bubble to the surface. I was angry at Leonard for not being the husband I had once believed him to be. I was angry at my children for turning their backs on me, for siding with Stephanie and abandoning me in favor of her perfect image. I was angry at myself for letting it all happen for so long, for putting up with the mistreatment, for not demanding more for myself. But deep inside, beneath the anger, there was something else, something more powerful. There was a flicker of hope. It was faint, but it was there. And that's when I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep waiting for them to change, for them to finally see me as more than just their caretaker. I had to do something for myself, something that would give me the life I deserved. I began to make plans, little by little. I started taking steps towards something that had been a dream for years, but had always felt out of reach: my own bakery. It wasn't just about the cakes. It was about reclaiming my independence, about building something of my own. I signed up for a small business course and began researching everything I needed to know to start a bakery. I even found a location in the heart of downtown, a little shop that had just the right charm. The idea of creating something beautiful with my own hands, something that was just mine, was exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose that didn't revolve around Leonard or the kids. I didn't tell Leonard what I was planning. Not yet. I knew he wouldn't understand, and I wasn't ready for the inevitable confrontation. But deep down, I knew that this was the path I had to take. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I wasn't waiting for his approval. This was for me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt strong one afternoon as I sat in a cafe, sipping on my coffee and looking over the plans for my bakery. I heard a familiar voice. It was Mike. He walked over to my table with a slight smile, but his eyes were guarded, uncertain. "Mom," he said, sitting down across from me, "we need to talk." I nodded, setting my coffee cup down. "What about—" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice low. "Look, I know things have been tense lately. I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to go about it. You can't just shut us out like this." I felt a surge of emotion, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not shutting anyone out, Mike, but I can't keep living my life for everyone else. I've spent 30 years making sure you all had what you needed, but now it's my turn." His face softened, but there was still that edge of concern. "I don't understand." "Mom, what about the family? What about us?" I looked him squarely in the eye. "I've been part of this family for all these years, but I've also been a person with my own dreams, my own needs, and I'm tired of putting everyone else first. This bakery, this is something I've always wanted. It's for me." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't judgment either. "I get it. Mom, I just don't want you to push us away." I smiled faintly, a small gesture of reassurance. "I'm not pushing anyone away, Mike, but I need to live my life for me now." As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Maybe Mike didn't fully understand, but at least he hadn't completely rejected my decision. For the first time in years, I felt like I was on the right path. And I knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, I was finally doing something for myself. The weeks that followed my quiet decision to pursue my dreams felt like the calm before a storm. I continued with my daily routine, but everything had changed within me. Leonard, Mike, and Ashley were still the same, but I wasn't. I had tasted the power of my own independence, and it was sweet, but it was also terrifying. The fear of rejection, of facing the family I had spent my life building, still lingered in my chest. But I had crossed a line now, and there was no going back. One evening, Leonard came home with that familiar air of indifference. He dropped his keys on the counter, glanced at me without saying a word, and went to change. It was as if nothing had happened, as if our lives hadn't shifted under the surface. I didn't know what I expected, but I certainly didn't expect him to acknowledge anything. After all, he had never really acknowledged me, not in the way that mattered. But this time, I wasn't waiting for him to say something. I wasn't waiting for his approval or for his permission. This time, I had a different plan. I was going to show him that I didn't need him to make my dreams come true. I was going to prove that I could stand on my own, without him and without his family's constant rejection. It was time for me to take control of my own future, something I should have done years ago. A few days later, I went to the bank to start putting the final pieces in place for my bakery. It wasn't much yet, just a few initial steps, but it was something real. I signed papers, opened an account for the business, and set aside the money I had saved for years. It felt like an act of defiance, but it also felt like a promise to myself that I was worth this. I wasn't asking for approval anymore. I was simply doing it. When I came back home, Leonard was sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up when I entered, his expression blank. "Where were you?" he asked casually, as if he were asking about my grocery run. "I was at the bank," I said, keeping my voice calm, "starting my bakery business." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Leonard didn't respond immediately, his eyes narrowing as if processing the words I had just spoken. Finally, he scoffed. "A bakery? Seriously, Claire." At your age, I held his gaze without flinching. "Yes, Leonard, a bakery. I've always wanted it, and I'm not going to wait for you or anyone else to approve of it anymore." His lips curled into a derisive smile, but there was no real humor in it. "You really think you can just start something like that? You've been out of the game for too long. Who would even support you?" I felt my anger start to rise, but I kept it in check. I had heard this all before: the doubts, the ridicule, the assumptions, but not anymore. I wasn't going to let him drown my dreams in his cold indifference. "I'll support myself. That's all I need. I've spent enough time living for you. It's my turn now." Leonard's face darkened. He pushed the papers aside, stood up from the table, and crossed the room toward me. His voice was low, filled with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. "You think you can just walk away from this family? Claire, you're throwing everything away. We've been through thick and thin, and now you're just going to run off and play with cakes?" The words stung, but I didn't let them show. Instead, I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm not walking away, Leonard. I'm finally walking towards something I've wanted for years, something I've earned, something that's mine. And if you can't see that, if you can't support me, then maybe that's your problem, not mine." His eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there, too, something I hadn't expected: fear. Fear that his control over me was slipping away. He took a step back, his shoulders stiffening. "This is ridiculous. You're being selfish. After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me." I shook my head, my voice steady. "I'm not repaying you, Leonard. I'm finally standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that makes me happy." His face twisted in frustration. "You really think you can just walk away from everything we've built? What about the family? What about us? There is no us anymore. Leonard, not like you think," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I've spent 30 years making sure everyone else was happy, that everyone else had what they needed. But now I'm doing something for me. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm doing this because I deserve it." The silence stretched between us, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Leonard didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. He had made it clear how he felt, but I had also made it clear how I felt. Later that evening, as I sat in the quiet of the house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to approve of my decisions. I wasn't waiting for Leonard's validation or for Mike and Ashley's support. I had made my choice, and I was going to follow through with it. I had my bakery to build, my dreams to chase, and no one, not even my family, was going to stand in my way. As the days went on, I began to feel the shift within me. The anger and sadness that had weighed me down for so long started to lift, replaced by something else, hope. Hope that I could create a life for myself, a life that was truly mine. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I was finally ready to fight for the life I deserved. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself living with a sense of purpose I had long forgotten. Every morning, I woke up with the same routine: coffee, breakfast, a quick glance at the bakery plans. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer simply existing in my life. I was actively shaping it. For the first time in years, I was doing something for myself, something that was mine, and that feeling, however small, was enough to keep me moving forward. I didn't speak to Leonard much after that confrontation. His indifference remained, and the silence between us grew heavier. It was clear that he resented my decision, but that no longer mattered to me. I had stopped living for his approval, stopped measuring my worth by the standards he set. Instead, I was focused on the future, on building something real. The mornings were often the hardest, especially when I thought about my children. They had always been the center of my world. I had given up my career for them, postponed my dreams, and poured every ounce of my energy into making sure they had everything they needed. But now, it felt like they were just echoes in my life, distant voices that spoke only when they wanted something. Mike and Ashley hadn't said much about my bakery, but the subtle judgments were there. The way they avoided my eyes when we spoke, the coldness in their voices, it was clear they didn't approve of my decision. And yet, despite their disapproval, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. One afternoon, while I was out running errands, I ran into an old friend from my past. She was someone I hadn't seen in years, a fellow mother from the school years who had always admired my baking skills. We exchanged pleasantries, and when she learned about my bakery plans, her face lit up with excitement. "Claire, that's incredible. I remember your cakes at the school fair. You've always had a gift. I'm so glad you're finally going after it." Her words felt like a balm to my wounded spirit. It wasn't just the praise that mattered, it was the recognition. For the first time in a long while, someone saw me for who I was, not for the role I had played in my family. She saw the woman behind the apron, the woman with dreams, with talent. That brief conversation gave me a surge of confidence I hadn't realized I was lacking. Later that evening, as I was sorting through business plans and recipes, I felt a quiet sense of peace. I was no longer consumed with thoughts of Leonard's harsh words or the dismissive glances from Mike and Ashley. I was building something that would make me proud, something I could stand behind, no matter who else stood with me. But just as I was starting to feel some semblance of calm, Leonard returned home, and with him came that familiar tension. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel his eyes on me as I worked. His silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. And then, as if on cue, he finally broke the stillness. "Have you made any progress on your little project?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. I glanced up from my notebook, meeting his gaze. "Yes, Leonard, I've made quite a bit of progress." He snorted, shaking his head. "It's a waste of time. Claire, you're dreaming of something that's never going to happen. You've spent 30 years of your life taking care of everyone else. What makes you think this time will be any different?" I felt the familiar sting of his words, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same woman who had quietly accepted his criticisms and kept her head down. "This time is different because I'm doing it for me," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not doing this to please you or anyone else. I'm doing this because it's something I've always wanted, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else stand in my way." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he might say something else, something to try and tear me down further. But instead, he just scoffed and walked away. It was almost worse than the verbal attacks. His indifference, his refusal to even engage, felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. But as I sat there, looking at my bakery plans, I realized something important. His words no longer had the power to hurt me. He no longer had the power to make me feel small. For the first time in years, I was free from the need for his validation. And with that freedom came strength I had forgotten I possessed. The next few days were filled with small victories. I finalized the lease for the bakery location and secured the necessary funding. I hired a few part-time staff and began designing the layout. Each step felt like a victory, a step closer to the life I had been dreaming of for so long. And with each victory, I grew more confident in my ability to succeed on my own terms. Then, one morning, Mike came by to visit. He was always the more reserved of the two children, and I had always felt a special bond with him. He had been distant since my decision to open the bakery, but when he walked through the door that morning, there was a different look in his eyes, one I hadn't seen before. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you," he said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. "I know I haven't been very supportive about the bakery, and I guess I was just worried about you. But I see now that this is important to you. I can't pretend to understand everything, but I do understand that you're doing this for yourself, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you." His words hit me like a wave. I wasn't sure I had ever heard him speak like that before. The walls I had built around my heart, the walls I had erected to protect myself from disappointment, began to crumble. Maybe my family hadn't completely abandoned me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for us to rebuild. "I appreciate that, Mike," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I really do. And I want you to know that this isn't just about the bakery. It's about me finding my way again. I've spent so many years living for others. Now, I want to live for myself." And for the first time in a long while, I felt that perhaps, just maybe, I was on the right path. The path toward independence, toward reclaiming the woman I had once been, and toward building a future that was truly mine. The more I built my bakery, the stronger I became. I felt it in every decision I made, in every step I took toward creating something that was entirely mine. Leonard's presence in the house grew more suffocating with each passing day. He still came home every night, but he spoke to me less and less. The cold indifference between us became more pronounced, and I didn't know whether it was his unwillingness to acknowledge my independence or his own internal conflict that kept him silent. Either way, I was no longer waiting for him to change, for him to offer support that was never coming. It was on one of these long, silent nights that I found myself standing in front of the oven at the bakery, watching a batch of cupcakes rise. The small shop was quiet, a cozy space that felt like my own sanctuary. The warm scent of sugar and vanilla filled the air, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. I wasn't just baking, I was creating, and each cake, each pastry, each delicate dessert I made was a piece of me. It was proof that I was capable of more than just being someone's wife, someone's mother. I was Claire, the woman who could build something from scratch, a woman who had a future beyond the roles I had been stuck in for so long. It was during one of these moments of quiet satisfaction that Mike walked into the bakery. His face was unreadable, as usual, but there was something different in his eyes, a softness, an openness I hadn't seen before. He had been by a few times since I started the bakery, but each visit had been brief, casual. This time, though, he lingered. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've been distant. I didn't get it. I didn't understand why you were doing all this, why you needed to do this for yourself, but I think I finally get it now." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. There was sincerity in his voice, something that hadn't been there when we had spoken about my bakery before. "What do you mean?" I asked softly, my heart racing slightly at the unexpected openness. I guess I was scared. "Mom," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Scared that if you started living for yourself, you'd stop being there for us. But I see now that it's not like that. You're not abandoning us. You're just finding yourself, and I can't hold you back from that. I should have seen it sooner. I'm proud of you." "Mom," his words hit me harder than I anticipated. I hadn't realized how much I'd longed to hear, that how much I had wanted my children to see me for who I was, and not just for what I had done for them. It wasn't easy for them, and I knew that. They had grown up with me in a role that was self-sacrificial, always catering to their needs, and I had never asked for anything in return. But to hear Mike say he understood, to hear him finally acknowledge my journey, felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. "Thank you, Mike," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I've spent so many years making sure everyone else was happy. I never realized how much I needed this for myself until now. I'm not giving up on you or your sister, but I need to live for me, too. Mike nodded, a small, understanding smile forming on his lips. He didn't say much after that, but the unspoken understanding between us felt like a bridge had been built. For the first time in years, I felt like he was really seeing me, not just as his mother, but as a person who deserved happiness beyond the role I had played for so long. Later that week, things took an unexpected turn. Leonard walked into the bakery, his usual coldness replaced by something I hadn't seen in a long time: hesitation. He didn't speak immediately, but I could tell he was studying the space, taking in the soft, welcoming atmosphere that I had created. The walls were lined with vintage-inspired decor. The counter was filled with freshly baked treats, and the smell of sweetness hung in the air. It wasn't just a bakery. It was a reflection of me, my hopes, and my dreams. For a moment, I felt a pang of vulnerability. What did he think of all of this? "You've really done something here," he finally said, his voice quiet. "This place, it looks good. You've worked hard." His words weren't exactly an apology, and they certainly weren't the validation I had once longed for, but they were something. They were an acknowledgement, even if it was a reluctant one. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I just nodded, letting the silence hang in the air. "I'm proud of you, Claire," he added after a long pause, his voice softer now. "I didn't think you had it in you, but you do." The words weren't much, but for me, they were enough. They didn't erase everything that had come before, but they marked a shift. For the first time in years, I felt like Leonard saw me as more than just the woman who served him and took care of everything. I had built something. I had achieved something. And whether he fully understood it or not, he had finally acknowledged that. As the days passed, I continued to work on my bakery, steadily growing my reputation in the community. I found joy in the little moments, the laughter of customers, the satisfaction of watching a cake rise perfectly, the warmth of the shop that felt like home. The bakery became my sanctuary, my refuge from the coldness of the rest of the world. It wasn't just a business. It was my lifeline. It was proof that I could stand on my own, that I could rebuild my life from the ground up. And slowly, I began to notice more subtle shifts in my family. Leonard came by more often, though I could still feel the distance between us. Mike visited, bringing Ashley along a few times, and though their visits were still tinged with awkwardness, I could sense a quiet pride in their eyes. For the first time in years, they were seeing me as something more than just the woman who served their needs. They were seeing me as Claire, the woman who had dreams, the woman who was strong enough to pursue them. I didn't know what the future held, but I was finally at peace with myself. I had spent so long living for others, but now I was living for me. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. As the weeks continued to pass, the bakery became more than just a business. It became my identity, a place where I could pour my soul into something that was just for me. Every morning, I woke up early to prepare the fresh batches of pastries, the soft dough rising under my hands, the sweet scents filling the air. There was something sacred about it, something fulfilling that I had never felt in my years of living for others. I no longer felt invisible. Here, in this small bakery, I was seen. But despite the sense of pride I took in my work, there were moments of loneliness. I had always been the one to care for others, my children, my husband, the household, and even though I had built something meaningful, the absence of that connection weighed on me. Leonard still hadn't fully accepted the changes I had made. His visits to the bakery were infrequent, and when he did show up, it was often with a detached air, like he was merely humoring me rather than supporting me. The awkward silences between us had become a constant reminder that things had shifted irreparably. One day, as I was wrapping a batch of cupcakes, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mike. I hadn't heard from him much since that one conversation we'd had at the bakery when he had expressed his support. The message was short, but it felt heavy with meaning. Mom, I think it's time we talk about everything. Can you meet me tomorrow? The simple request sent a knot of anxiety through my chest. I didn't know what he meant by everything, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be easy. I hadn't fully realized how much my decision to pursue my bakery had impacted my relationship with my children. In many ways, I had been so focused on my own journey of rediscovery that I had failed to see how they were coping with the changes. The next day, I closed up the bakery a little earlier than usual and drove to the cafe where Mike had asked me to meet him. My mind raced with thoughts, trying to predict what he was going to say. What had I missed? Had my pursuit of happiness driven him further away? The idea of losing my children, losing the connection we once had, was terrifying. When I arrived, Mike was already sitting at a corner table, his coffee half drunk, his eyes distant. He looked older, worn down in a way that made my heart ache. As I sat down across from him, I noticed the unease in his posture, the way he fidgeted with his cup. Hey, Mom, he said quietly, his voice soft but hesitant. I've been thinking a lot about you and everything that's happened. About the bakery, about About us. I nodded, giving him the space to speak. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, but I didn't want to interrupt. I was ready to hear whatever he had to say. I didn't get it at first. He continued, his voice tinged with regret. I was upset, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I saw you making these big changes, and I guess I felt like you were leaving us behind, like we didn't matter anymore, that your dreams were more important than what we needed. My chest tightened at his words, but I kept my expression neutral. I could feel the weight of the misunderstanding between us, the guilt I had carried for years, always putting their needs before my own. I had never meant to make them feel abandoned. I had always believed that by caring for them, by sacrificing my own dreams, I was showing them love. But now I realized that it wasn't just about doing things for them. It was about being present in a way that acknowledged who I was, not just the roles I had played. I'm sorry, Mike, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I never meant for you to feel that way. I've always put everything into making sure you and Ashley had what you needed. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself. I never realized how much I needed something of my own, something that wasn't tied to being your mom or your dad's wife. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you or that you don't matter. Mike looked down at his coffee, the silence between us stretching out. I could see him wrestling with his thoughts. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. I think I've been selfish too. Mom, I didn't understand. I was so caught up in my own stuff that I didn't take the time to think about what you needed. I've been holding on to the idea of you being the way you were, the mom who was always there, and I didn't know how to handle the fact that you wanted something different. I should have seen it sooner. I should have supported you more. His words stung, but not in the way Leonard's did. This felt different. This was an acknowledgement, a recognition that he had, in some way, failed to understand my needs. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real, and that was enough. I understand. Mike, I said, reaching across the table and placing my hand over his. And I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're talking about it. I don't expect everything to be perfect. I just want us to be able to see each other, really see each other, for who we are now, not who we were. Mike squeezed my hand, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, me too. Mom, me too. As we left the cafe, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope for healing, not just in my own heart, but in my relationship with my children. They had seen me, truly seen me, and that was all I had ever wanted. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. Mike came by the bakery more often, asking about my new recipes and showing genuine interest in what I was creating. Ashley still had her reservations, but I could see small signs of change in her too. The wall that had separated us for so long was slowly coming down. I knew it wouldn't be easy, nothing worth having ever is, but I was finally on the right path. I had taken control of my own life, and that was something I could never go back on. And with each passing day, I realized that I was no longer just Claire, the woman who had spent 30 years losing herself for others. I was Claire, the woman who had fought to find her way again, and this time, nothing could take that away from me. As I continued to build my life around the bakery, the air in my home felt heavier. Leonard, Mike, and Ashley seemed to move in their own worlds, unaware or maybe uncaring of the small but important changes happening in mine. They didn't see the late nights I spent perfecting my recipes, the early mornings when I woke up to bake with nothing but the sound of my own thoughts to keep me company. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore, but somewhere deep inside, I longed for a shift in their perceptions. But even with the success of the bakery, a dark cloud of rejection still hovered over me. The family I had spent my entire life nurturing, the family I had sacrificed everything for, had become distant. They had moved on from me in ways I hadn't fully understood until I started to rebuild my own identity. Their absence, their silence, weighed on me in ways I couldn't always articulate. The most painful part wasn't the coldness of Leonard's dismissive attitude or the occasional guilt trip from Ashley. It was Noah, my grandson, the one person I thought I still held a special place with, the one person I imagined I could still connect with. But when he visited the bakery, when he came into the shop with his parents, it was as if I were invisible to him. It had started slowly, a shift I had noticed but hadn't dared to confront. Noah, once the child I had rocked to sleep and comforted through every scrape and bruise, had begun to pull away. He no longer sat next to me at family dinners or begged for my cookies like he used to. Instead, he stayed close to his mother, or even more painfully, to Stephanie. One afternoon, as I arranged a batch of cupcakes in the display case, I looked up to see Noah standing by the counter, his tiny arms crossed. He had been staring at me for some time, and I couldn't tell if it was curiosity or something else in his gaze. "Hi, Noah," I said softly, trying to sound warm, trying to close the distance that had grown between us. But he didn't respond. Instead, he wrinkled his nose, the same way he used to when he was just a toddler and didn't like something. He raised his hand to cover his nose, as though the scent of the shop was too much for him. "Grandma," he said, his voice small but clear, "it smells bad, like old stuff, like the flea market." My heart sank, a painful pang twisting inside me. I wasn't angry, not at first. It was more like the sting of something sharp, something that felt final. I watched as he turned away and ran toward his mother. His words echoed in my ears as I stood frozen, staring at the spot where he had just been. Ashley had heard him, of course. She rushed over with that practiced smile on her face, the one she always wore when trying to smooth things over. "Noah," she said, her voice a little too sweet. "You shouldn't say things like that. Grandma worked really hard on this bakery." I could tell she was embarrassed by what had just happened, but I also knew that she wasn't angry with Noah. Her eyes flicked toward me, not in sympathy, but in that distant, dismissive way that had become so familiar. I wasn't even sure if she truly saw me anymore. The pain I felt wasn't just from Noah's words. It was from the years of watching my family grow further and further away from me, watching as they replaced me with someone else, someone who seemed to fit the mold of the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect mother, and now, my own grandson, the child I had poured my love into for so many years, saw me as nothing more than someone out of place, someone who didn't belong. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out from behind the counter. I needed space, air, something to clear my head. I walked to the back of the bakery, to the little storage room I had turned into my retreat. As I closed the door behind me, I let out a shaky breath. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was hurt, deeply hurt. I had always been there for my family. I had been the one who stayed up late, making their favorite meals, the one who stepped in when they needed help, the one who sacrificed her own happiness for theirs. But in return, I had been cast aside, relegated to the background of their lives. And now, even my grandson had started to forget me, to see me as nothing more than a burden. The soft chime of the bakery's doorbell brought me back to reality. I stood there for a moment, frozen, but then I knew that I couldn't stay hidden forever. I took a deep breath and wiped my eyes before walking back into the main area of the shop. As I re-entered the front, I saw Leonard, Mike, and Ashley standing near the door. They were all talking, laughing, pretending like nothing had happened. Stephanie was nowhere to be found, but I didn't feel any more at ease with her absence. Mike glanced at me as I walked toward the counter. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Leonard spoke up. His tone was casual, like he was talking about the weather. "You know, Claire, I've been thinking, maybe you should sell this place. It's a lot of work for someone your age, and with everything that's going on, it might be time to move on." His words were like a slap in the face. I stopped in my tracks, my hands clenched tightly at my sides. "Move on," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper, but the anger was there, simmering just beneath the surface. "You've done enough." "Claire," Leonard continued, his voice cold and dismissive, "you've given enough. It's time for you to let someone else take care of things. You don't need to be running a bakery." Something inside me snapped. I had spent years caring for everyone else, and now they were telling me to give up the one thing that had finally brought me joy, finally made me feel alive. I turned to face them, my voice steady but firm. "This bakery is mine. It's mine, Leonard. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else tell me what I can or can't do anymore." I could see the surprise in their eyes, the confusion, but I didn't care. I had spent enough years being the one who bent to their will. I was done. This was my life, and I was going to live it on my own terms, no matter what they thought of me. As I turned back to the counter, I heard Noah's voice once more, but this time there was something different in it. "Grandma, can I try one of your cupcakes?" It wasn't much, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. The silence in my home had become almost suffocating. Leonard's coldness lingered like a thick fog, and the once warm, bustling household now felt like a shadow of what it used to be. Every morning, I would wake up and head straight to the bakery, finding solace in the sweet aroma of freshly baked goods. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was a small victory in a life that had been defined by sacrifice. I wasn't waiting for Leonard's approval anymore. I wasn't even sure I cared whether he understood my need for independence. What I had built for myself was real, and that was enough. One day, as I was working behind the counter, Noah came into the bakery again. This time, there was something different about him. He wasn't holding his nose like he had the last time, and he didn't seem as distant. Slowly, he approached the counter, eyes wide with curiosity. "Grandma," he said softly, "can I try one of your cupcakes?" I paused for a moment, surprised by the request. This small act, this simple gesture, felt like the world was shifting back into place, just a little. I smiled, my heart swelling with a mixture of joy and relief. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, as I handed him a freshly baked cupcake. As he took a bite, I could see the warmth in his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally been seen again. It wasn't a perfect moment, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but in that fleeting moment, it felt like something beautiful had been rekindled. Maybe it was just a cupcake, but for me, It was a reminder that love, no matter how buried or distant, could find its way back to the surface. Life often leads us down paths where we forget who we are, where we lose sight of our dreams for the sake of others. But no matter how much we give, we must never lose ourselves in the process. Sometimes it takes a quiet moment of rediscovery, a step towards something that's truly ours, to remember the person we were meant to be. If you're feeling lost or like your voice is no longer heard, remember this: it's never too late to reclaim your life. You are worthy of your dreams, and you have the power to rebuild. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of strength, perseverance, and self-discovery. Let's continue to walk this journey together.